Hey gang, Rodin here. Welcome on back to the Retrocade and Happy New Year. Hope 2024 gets off to as good a start as possible for all of you, and welcome to our latest edition of our one-day playthroughs. And for this one, we're going to go back to 1985 and the little old Nintendo Entertainment System and play a game that back in the day was one that was near and dear to me, but as we go through it, was also one of the first examples of me almost having a full gamer rage fit. And if you've been a gamer like me for even a reasonable amount of time, you know what that feeling is like. We're going to play 1942. This game was originally an arcade game that was produced by Capcom, along with the lead systems Micronix and Digital Eclipse. Micronix, along with Data East, ported it onto the NES in 1985. And what we're going to do over the course of the next half an hour is we're going to go through and we're going to try and get as far in this game as we can. Now, if you're not familiar with 1942 and games of its ilk, it's not a hard game to play, and it's not a really complicated game to follow, in that it's very much in the vein of the classic top-down bullet hell shooters of the day. So in this one, you play an American pilot in a P-38 Lightning fighter jet, and you're having to take out the Japanese Air Corps. And as you see, they're coming at us in fairly normal patterns, and every once in a while you've got to look out for getting hit, and then you will also be able to get power-ups if you take out the yellow planes. Now, the green planes tend to fly in diagonal lines. The green ones tend to be a bit more random. We will have other bigger planes that will show up, like this guy right here, who we got to take out because he's going to start spreading bullets at us. And the thing about it is that if you are familiar with old-style games like Galaga and Galaxian and Space Invaders, and even games like Centipede, not Centipede, then this should not be anything untowards to you. The thing about this game was it was a good introduction for me to get used to games that I would play later on. And of course, this sort of stuff was the rave in arcades all throughout the 1980s. Because there were not hard games to create. There were games that were absolute machines as far as devouring quarters. And because it was a game you can play and beat in probably 2 hours, it qualifies for being a one-day playthrough. Now, by comparison to modern games, this thing is going to be absolutely archaic. But the nice thing is we are now at a point where we can go ahead and land this plane. And every time we hit the aircraft carrier, we're able to get through the level and we take off again. So, one thing about this game is that the stages go in descending order. So we start on level 32, and the ultimate goal is to get to level 1, which is where we will eventually have worked our way over the Pacific Ocean, as well as Midway and Saipan, and a lot of the classic battles in the Pacific in World War II, and eventually reach Tokyo. Now, where I said this game creates a massive point of consternation with me is that the one time I sat down, and I was probably, 10 years old? It probably had to be about 1987, 88, so I was about 10, 11. And I was determined to get through this game. Now, there are no saves in this game. That's one thing to bear in mind. Oof, as I got taken out. But also, the way the NES was back in the day, it tended to be a temperamental little beastie. So, imagine you're sitting there, you're playing through this game, and you're working your way through all these stages, and you're getting by all these enemies, and you're shooting down all these planes. And I think I got to level 2. So I was pretty much at the end of the game. and then the game locked up. Now, when I say I got as close to a gamer rage fit as I have probably ever been, even at that age, I don't think it was wholly unjustified. Because I was really, really ticked off. But as you see, each level only takes about 2 minutes to get through. And in addition to our guns, the other thing we have at our disposal is if we hit the A button, we can go ahead and do a barrel roll, or we can do essentially a full 360 flip. And that can help potentially get us out of a jam if we're really up against getting shot down. Because it only takes one hit from any fighter and we're gone. Like so. Now, the obvious question you're going to ask me is, well, if you only get 3 planes, how do you beat this game in one go? The one thing that they did program into it is they did program the ability to do continues. Because I've already lost one of my escort planes, I didn't want to do that. But having them... Whoa! Look out. Those bombers tend to sneak up on you if you're not really paying attention. Ah! And I got taken out. So now I'm down to my last guy. And this is a game where if you've got a modern controller and you can map key in a turbo function, it saves your thumbs dramatically. Because then you can just hold the B button down and just fire. And then hopefully steer clear of any planes that are going to be potentially taking you down. Now, this was far from the most popular game for the NES, and it really wasn't a huge arcade game either. But what it did do, oof, because I wasn't even paying attention to that bullet. Shooting down 443 planes, percentage 77%. But we will go ahead and continue. Unfortunately, we start pretty much from the spot where, or the last major spot where we died. So now I gotta take this bomber out again. But as I was saying, in the early mid-80s, I should say around 84, 85, the whole idea of the outer space top-down bullet hell shooter like Galaga and Galaxian and games of that sort, they'd kind of run their course. And because kids my age, who grew up in the era of the arcade, were always looking for the next big thing, video game companies were always trying to find something novel to get kids to pop their quarters into. So they had to come up with ideas that were not too much different than utilizing conventional game mechanics and concepts at the time, but they had to put it in a new package. Which is where a game like 1942 came from. Now, the thing about this game is that it actually proved to be successful enough that it spawned an entire secondary franchise for Capcom of games that followed this exact same setup, but they became known as the 1940X series. So there was 1942, obviously, then they did 1943, and it was of a pretty much identical design, but with better graphics and more stuff in it. And then you had different special abilities. And from there, you started getting a lot more different ideas of games like Raiden, and you know, there's a gazillion top-down shooters that came about as a result of not just what had been laid out in the early 80s in the arcades, but also games like this. So really, this was, for not being a super popular and super hyped game, I mean, I tried finding any reviews of this game. There were none back in the day. But it was enough of a proof of concept that Capcom and similar companies decided, okay, well, let's start coming up with different ideas without reinventing the wheel. And some of these levels, as you're seeing right here, I'm not having any real issue taking out these planes. As long as I don't have any of them come up behind me, I should be okay. Now this little green plate, if I hit this and get this pinwheel, I get a huge gaggle of points. And as long as I make it back to the carrier, I'm okay. But after this, yeah, 1987, we got 1943, the Battle of Midway. Oop, I gotta get these specialty planes here. Oh, I missed it. I was hoping to get them. Alright, now I got some more bullets to fire with. But now, as you see, the topography that we're flying over is changing as we're hitting more of a mainland. In some ways that helps, and in some ways that's a hindrance, because now trying to be able to discern the bullets flying at you from other stuff is not that easy. And even playing on a modern monitor, I mean, I'm playing on a really big monitor, so a lot of this stuff I should be able to pick out pretty quickly. And even this is a little bit of a challenge. And if there's one thing that is a bit of an annoyance, it is that Morse code, like, beat in the background. That's essentially the only music that is in the game as you are playing. Oh! And I flew right into it. But yeah, in the 1940X series, there have been eight games that have been released over about 30 years. Oh, are you kidding me? Ronan, what are you doing? You're gonna lose your wings that way. Now, I know it is possible to get extra lives in this game, because otherwise it should have been game over for me by this stage. And I think it's every 50 or it may be every 40,000 points. I'm not entirely sure. And I did look it up. I did try to confirm when you can get extra lives and how you get them. But be that as it may, it is possible to be able to have more lives than the standard 3 you start with. You just have to keep shooting planes down. Whoa. As we're back to carrier. As long as you get to the point where all the other planes blow up, then you're fine. Now, as somebody like me who grew up loving airplanes, and especially military aviation, I was a kid, you know, I'm of the Top Gun generation, not to say that I adore the movie, but, you know, I was 9-10 years old in 1985, 86, and right around the time that movie came out, and it was very much what the Navy and the military wanted to be a huge recruiting boon for aspiring flight jockeys. And of course, the idea for me, being somebody who could go and fly an F-14, it has been something where I have spent most of my life, I get taken out by a zero there, playing different types of flight simulators. Like when I got to the PlayStation generation and we started getting now we're getting jets. We started seeing the Ace Combat series from Konami. That was one that was really exciting to me because it allowed me to be that sort of a flight jockey. But you have to think that games like that wouldn't necessarily exist were it not for games like this initially fueling people's interest in classic military-style flight games. Now, granted, there's a huge difference between this and any Ace Combat game. I grant you that. But I still stand by the idea that if you can get somebody's interest in playing a game that involves aviation, or even like it is in most of the sports games I cover, yes, you're looking at a fairly niche audience, depending on the subject matter, but it's still one where once you get that seed planted in a gamer's mind, you'd be amazed what sort of stuff they go for. So, I mean, we're at 18 minutes and we've already conquered 5 stages. Now I got my escort planes. Out of all the power-ups you can get in this game, as much as I like being able to shoot 4 cannons instead of 2, having the escort planes is easily my second favorite thing in this game, as I already lose one of them, which isn't what I wanted. Well, we're already at 140,000 points, which may seem silly by modern comparisons, the idea that, you know, we still keep a point tally, but again, this being an arcade port, this was how you judged who was good in the game and who wasn't, was how high a point total you had by the time you died. Okay, so now we have a big boss to get through, which is going to be this big monster here. Ooh. And we didn't make it. So we have 144,400 points. We shot down 707 aircraft, 79%. But the nice thing is we can still continue. And this was a fairly novel thing for most games back in the day. The idea that they built in the possibility that if you ran out of lives and you kept going, you could just pick up pretty much right where you left off. Now let's see if we can't take this bad boy out. Ah! And because it's completely manned with cannons, you've got to get down the pattern recognition of the bullet spread pretty quickly if you want to survive it. Now, in later games, when you did the barrel roll, it usually unleashed a super weapon of its own. Ah! I thought I got enough to get through there. That would make battles like this a little bit easier. It wouldn't make them totally easier because Capcom decided that if they were going to give you the ability to do more damage, they were going to make the sub-bosses more difficult. Let's see if I can't get by this sucker before we run out of time, because we have about 10 minutes to go. Ah! And I knew it was coming, too. I saw that bullet and went, no, I got it. So we only shot down 46 planes. But again, we'll start right here and see how far we get. The crazy thing is that since it has been, what, 35 years since I played this game last, one, my reflexes have definitely waned, but also it's one where Whew. Oh, and I took it out. I had knocked it down and then I died. Ah, that's really frustrating. Because you think, okay, I finally took care of it. I got past it, and now I don't have to deal with it anymore. And one little bullet takes you out. And if you were in an arcade back in the day and you were watching somebody play this or were near somebody playing this, I can't tell you how often you would have heard somebody just throw an absolute conniption fit. Especially if in an arcade, because you know you're out a quarter. Whereas playing it on the NES, you at least had the virtue of just knowing you were down another life, and then you had to really come back and take this thing out, or you're going to have to continue again. Ah! Damn it, you got me. So we got about 7 minutes, so we'll try one more time. I want to get by this big old galoot. Okay. Alright, you big old albatross, you. Ah! You don't want to stay too close to the tail because the bullets come out in a closer, tighter cluster and they're harder to evade. So what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to stay out a little bit further out on the wings, but at the same time, because the pattern comes out just random enough, it is hard to really anticipate what you're getting and how. There we go, we finally took it out. Well, I won't lie, that feels like an actual accomplishment. We got 20,000 points for it. And now it's a straight shot back to the carrier, and down we will land. And we got 100,000 points. Which gave us an extra guy. The only problem is now we got about 4 minutes to go before we hit the half an hour. We got more dive bombers coming through. More torpedo planes coming through. Now for this one, you want to be able to save there's a lot of planes on the board, and then you hit that one and they all get blown up. And you never get to a point where you can take out pretty much every plane on the board once you get past the first level. There's just too much chaos in the sky. You got too many planes flying around. You know you're going to miss some of them. Because by this stage, now they're coming in from all directions, including behind you. We still haven't had a big bomber show up yet. But I would think there should be one. Nope, we're going to make it back to the carrier. Now, there also isn't a pause on this game. At least not that I remember. We'll see if we get one. Nope, we do get one. So, we're at 27 minutes, and I'm going to call it good there because we could keep going on for another 2 hours at least. But this is a game you can get through in a day. The question is, do you have, not the intestinal fortitude, do you have the stamina and the constitution to do it? But that, everybody, is 1942 from 1985 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, created by Capcom. Now, we'll get to our usual two questions. Is it a good game? By modern standards, no. I mean, it's extremely basic. The graphics are nothing to write home about. The music, there is no music except for the start and end of every level, and that repetitive Morse code signal that you get throughout the game is really annoying. You're almost better off playing it with on as low a sound as you can get in order to keep yourself from just going completely nutty. Otherwise, I have found that because it's something that you can kind of force your hearing to go into the background on it, you can pretty much drown it out. But I mean, for the time, it wasn't a great game. It was an arcade port. But it was one that, again, proved the concept that getting out of the early 80s fascination and obsession with outer space type of bullet hell games, it was time to evolve and move on to other ideas. That's not to suggest in any way that those games are bad. Some of my favorite arcade games of all time are still Galaga, Galaxian, Centipede, Gyrus, stuff like that. You know, I'm not damning them with any sort of faint praise, but by the mid-'80s, it was time to see what else you could do with the form. And Capcom decided, well, let's try and do this. Is it a game you could remake nowadays? Well, like I said, there are 8 variations of the 1940X series that were made over... The last one came out in 2010, so it would be about 25 years. They could do it, but really it's a question of why do it. You could probably make a really, with what you can do nowadays with, you know, top down and side-scrolling games, and we've seen it across the indie market every month. There seems to be a new game that is really getting people's attention. The technology is absolutely there to do it. It's just, would anybody really be interested in playing it outside of people who were really purists for this sort of stuff back then? I don't think so. I don't think there's a big enough demand, and I don't think there's a big enough market to it. So, could we see one come out in the next couple of years? Sure, why not? But it'd be a question of, would I think Capcom would do it? No. I think somebody would have to go back and be more of an independent game designer and come up with something that would get people's attention. But I mean, there's been a lot of games. I mean, we featured Einhander on here, which is obviously a side-scrolling shooter, but that one was a surprise in the mid-90s. And we also had games like Ikaruga, and there's still games of this type that come out. They're just not as prevalent as they used to be. So if you want to give it a try, absolutely. I'm playing it on the Messen emulator, which again is a free emulator, MESEN. It's not a hard ROM to find. You can get off of pretty much any NES ROM site you can look for, and give it a try. And if you have played it and you have beaten it, or if you want to go back and give it a whirl for the first time, let me know. Let me see. Tell me what you think about it. So, but in the meantime, that is our one-day playthrough for this Monday, for this New Year's Day. Again, Happy New Year to everybody out there. And again, thank you so much for your help and your support and your subscriptions, most importantly, over the last year. We did hit our goal of 100 subscribers, so now we're looking to see how we can branch out in new directions and make this channel, as always, bigger and better. Hope you've been enjoying our ongoing playthrough of Dark Souls Remastered. We're now at episodes 26, I think we put in the can this last week, and now we will continue that forward. I think we've got about another... realistically, maybe another 20 episodes to go in that series, and then we'll see about getting Sports Saturday and Suckerpunch Sunday restarted. We will also have a WTF Wednesday coming up this week, where, again, if you're not familiar with it, it's a series where we take a look at games that on paper seem like a good idea, but in actuality, not so much. So we will have that as well. But my name is Ron. It's been great to spend this half an hour with you. Be safe, be well, Happy New Year, and we will talk to you again on Wednesday. Bye.